Next up, we've got Doug Pabst, who is with the EPA, involved in sediment management, and you've heard folks referring to ours a lot today, and here's our resident.
Too much
ours expert.
Thank you everybody. I've been with EPA for 25 years, and we've only been around for about 40, and most of our laws are about 40 years old, so this month, actually October, is the 40th anniversary of the Clean Water Act, and also the 40th anniversary of the Marine Protection, Research, and Sanctuaries Act, or the Ocean Dumping Act. So really, we only started understanding how we were going to regulate the aquatic environment back in the 70s, and I'll talk a little bit about how things happened before then. Should I use the computer? Or Well, we know enough about the harbor. We've heard a little bit about that. We'll skip over that. Okay, now. We got a lot of people living in this, and if you look at a sediment shed, there's about 16 million people that are somehow impacting this water body. If you go up into the upstate areas that were discussed before one night, we are, grasping the concept of sediment shed as well. But you've got CSOs, you've got Superfund sites, we've got air deposition, sewage treatment plant discharges, and we also have, this was the cradle of the Industrial Revolution. So just about every chemical that's out there was somehow manufactured here and dumped. Without any regulations up until EPA came about. So that's a lot of input that we are now trying to deal with as far as the sediments go. But then, water quality-wise, things are getting better. The sediments are obviously also getting better, but it's a big challenge as science allows us to detect this stuff even lower and lower detection limits, and we're finding out the impacts through better science as well. Ooh, I like that. It's also very important to understand this is an ecological gem. I think that Lisa showed this slide of the world-class estuary, both economically and environmentally. I think there's a lot of important environmental areas in the harbor, and there's a lot of things that we want to continue to protect and promote. At the same time, we're incorporating all of this economic engine that is New York, New Jersey Harbor, the port. How do we do it all? This is a snippet of the different agencies that are involved in dredge material management. We have a regional dredging team that meets, we used to meet monthly, now we meet every other month. I'm co-chair along with Monty Regis from the Corps of Engineers, and we try to get together and sort through the myriad of legal, scientific, and technical challenges associated with moving all of the sediment that we need to do in New York Harbor. Now let's talk about some context here as to the aquatic environment. Pretty much everything was dumped in the ocean back in the day. I mean, it probably started with the Vikings when they first came over, and it's progressed ever since then. So what I have up here is a slide that shows from the 1800s. We can go back pretty much to about that. And the Army Corps of Engineers was in charge at the time until EPA came around in the 70s. And you can see this sort of ink blot shows progressively how it was moved further and further offshore the disposal location where dredge material was placed until we get to the box on there, which I think is, oh, look at that, right there. That was what was called the mud dump site that we designated back in 1977, where dredge material was placed. EPA designates the sites, the Army Corps of Engineers issues the permits. But it's also important to understand that while we designated this for space only, it wasn't really an environmental consideration at the time. It was just that obviously we were running out of space. We didn't want to have mounds out there that ships could run aground on. But if you look at where we started regulating with our laws, 50s and 60s, you had all this really great stuff that was dumped out here, dioxins, PCBs. So all the sediments that had received all of those discharges were placed outside of areas that we had regulatory control over. So what happened? You've all heard about the historic area remediation site. Well, the mud dump site filled up back in the 90s, about 1992, I think, as we all, the nightmares of mudlock, those of you that were born then can remember. But it was when basically the science had identified issues with the dredge material going out into the environment. We needed to dredge. It wasn't happening. Ships weren't getting in. There was talk about the port moving. So it was quite a confluence of, as one of my mentors says, when two elephants fight in the jungle, it's the grass that suffers. So we had these two huge powers that were battling each other for some sort of clarity. It actually got solved with the designation of the historic area remediation site, and it was actually facilitated by Vice President Gore at the time. So it really got up to a high level in the government as far as this particular issue is concerned. And the decision that was made was the designation of the HARS. And we made a conscious decision. It was a public policy decision that we were going to take a certain amount of material that we determined to be suitable to be used to cover material that had been dumped outside of the old mud dump site. So you see there's the old mud dump site, and here's the HARS. So this is 16 square mile area now that we're actually remediating, using dredge material beneficially to remediate that. But material that used to go out to the ocean now had to find a place to go elsewhere. I think that's what you heard a little bit about here today. And we heard about that. Okay, now, dredge cycle, regional sediment management. This is sort of, what do we want to do with dredge material? We want to utilize it as a regional resource. We want to look comprehensively at dredge material like we do water. So EPA created the National Estuary Program in the 1980s, and New York and Jersey Harbor is one of the National Estuary Programs. So what we decided to do in 2006 was let's get everybody at the table and say, in a perfect world, how would you want to manage dredge material? And we produced a report called Regional Sediment Management Plan for the New York, New Jersey Harbor area, and it's available online. And that's sort of our wish list of how we want to manage dredge material. And it has some major themes associated with it. We want to look system-wide. We want to recognize sediments as a resource. Actively do sustainable solutions, things you've heard here before, themes. We have challenges. Obviously, the sediment is very contaminated. And it's also dealt with in very different ways, different regulations, requirements. And that's one of the impediments to dredge material management, I think, is that it's not like there's a Clean Water Act. There is a Clean Water Act, not a Clean Sediment Act, I meant. So sediment is regulated, basically, if somebody wants to touch it only. If you want to dredge it, it's regulated. If you want to remove it for Superfund, it's regulated. If you want to deal with it in a brownfields capacity, it's regulated. But in and of itself, it's not regulated. So somebody upstream, some town upstream, making a decision on where to put a Home Depot that rips out a wetland, that rips down a forest, could actually be causing more sediment to come down into New York Harbor. How do you get a handle on that? And that's where the concept of regional sediment management comes in. And we want clean sediments. Clean sediments are happy sediments. Obviously, then we would be able to do anything with the sediment. We need sediment. Obviously, sediment, replenishes the wetlands. We need to make sure we have enough sediment. We want to keep it out of some areas and want it in other areas. We've heard all about, this will save money. If you had clean sediment, you could save millions and millions of dollars a year, possibly, in upland placement costs for dredge material. So obviously the benefits of regional sediment management, I think, is really where we want to focus, and what the purpose of this conversation really is to focus on. I think it's a cost savings at the greater good. If the sediment was clean, it could go anywhere. We wouldn't have to do all of this special handling and treatment of it. You would be able to have more material for habitat. We would also have a better understanding of the system and how sediment is such an integral part, treating it as an organism like we do water. And we did try, over the years, we spent $42 million between the federal and the state of New Jersey, mostly, and a myriad of partners, to do all kinds of fancy stuff with the sediment over the years. Actually, some of the people in this room were very instrumental in making that happen. We did all kinds of things. We washed it, we killed it, we burned it, we chemically attacked it, we treated it with cement. We did all of these things. And they were all technically able to be done. But at the end of the day, we ended up with the same problem. Why is this dirt so hard to deal with? What's the big deal? It's dirt, right? It's not a big deal. Well, this is why. It's not like you know how much you're going to dredge every year. Businesses make decisions based on available funds. They have the government. Sometimes we give a lot of money. The Corps gets a lot of money to dredge. Sometimes they don't. So if you have to invest a lot of your money into a business model, these are some of the things that you're going to want to understand. Superfund, with the material from Superfund sites like the Hudson River, there was a 27-year decision. So if you're sitting around waiting to make a decision on what to do with the sediment coming out of that, that's a kind of a long wait. And the Passaic River's been going for a long time. Gowanus has been going. Well, that's actually not that old, so we can't take too much for that. But the point I'm getting at is nobody knows. The government can't issue long-term contracts. I think we could have a whole presentation on contracting for the deepening project. They were done piecemeal. So nobody got all the material and was able to then do the best thing to do with all that material. Everybody had to bid on every project. So again, that's an impediment to moving forward. And I think litigation is, I'm not going to talk about litigation. Might be a lawyer in the room. I don't want to make any lawyer jokes. And I look forward to more conversations about the regional sediment management. I think this is a good venue to pursue that issue. And obviously, we like seals, so. Thank you.
Questions for Doug?
Come on, let me have them.
Yes, when we are using the clean sand cap older, more contaminated areas, is there any way that we can accelerate the process of remediation in place for some of these, rather than just cover them over? We add something, is there any kind of addition we can make or process we can do to accelerate the attenuation of some of the contaminants?
Well, what we found so far with our studies is we're putting this dredge material out at least a 1 meter lift out across 16 square miles. Some places we've got 10 feet, some places we have 12 feet of material. So clearly the cleaner material going on top of the other material is taking care of that. And we want to preserve that capacity, I think, for the material that's going to be coming out of your carbon. There was a capacity question before. And I think there was a slide that showed about 50 million cubic yards of materials going out by scow volume. About 50% of that is water. So you figure we put about 26 million cubic yards of material out since 1997, and we've still got a long way to go as far as the HARS is concerned. It's sort of the English muffin effect. You get all these nooks and crannies on the bottom, and then you got to go in and try to fill them all in. So it's hard to get at 1 meter perfect spot. Yeah.
To what extent would you guys consider, or maybe you are already working on like model legislation for a Clean Sediment Act? And what do you think? Do you think the climate of the U.S. is ready for that, or do we need to set some sediment on fire like they did in Ohio?
Wow, that's a loaded question. Easy. Legislation is a dirty word these days, obviously, so we don't hold our breath. But there was attempts back in the 90s to do a Sediment Quality Act that was done, and it was close, but the bipartisan type environment really broke down even back then. It's interesting, the Clean Water Act was passed with a bipartisan and a veto override of the president at the time. So anything's possible, and certainly I think there's a lot of people that would like to see sediment treated as an entity legally, so it would be better to manage. But right now it's anybody's. I don't see that on the horizon. But we certainly would welcome an opportunity to review legislation associated with it.
Got time for a few more. Anybody?
It seems like the biggest problem with this material is that and generally we consider it ubiquitous, like it's dredge material, right?
Dirt.
But of course it's, or it's dirt.
Dirt.
Yeah, which you are never supposed to say in landscape architecture school, right? It's always soil. But you have, but of course it's it's really variable material. And so finding, it seems like here it's a polar topic, like it's either HARS placeable or not, right? So there's like a line and it's good or bad. We've been using the word clean, we've been using the word contaminated, but of course there's a really big gray zone in terms of what.
I didn't use either of those words, just so you know.
No, I'm saying as a group we've been discussing it. So do you see a development in the kind of classification of this material in ways where we can actually figure out not just what's in it, but what it can be used for? And then of course the challenges are how you actually test the stuff because I think of confined disposal facilities that have a huge range of different types of soil in them, depending on where you pulled it and when you pulled it. Are there things that are being done here in New York and other places that you know of that actually are working at trying to be more specific in terms of testing the kind of actual samples of soil and where it could actually go, other than just here, say for example, where it could go out to the HARS site or it can't?
I mean, it's not really a technology question in the sense that it's really a public will question and what the regulatory, the coalition of the willing, if you will bear. And in this part of the world, we've decided the aquatic environment is, we're not going to do it. And you have to look back at the abuses that have happened to the aquatic environment over the years to understand where that came from. So that's a decision that was made here. What hasn't followed that decision is that then there should be this acceptance that we're going to have to pay more to do business in this part of the world, and that means the people that live here, it really hasn't translated all the way through. So there's sort of I really think that at the end of the day, if people want to pay more to keep stuff out of the ocean, then there's going to have to be some way that gets translated into the appropriation process, so that's recognized for us. Other parts of the country do things very differently based on their particular coalition of how they want to manage their material. So it's very much a societal question, I think, is my point.
We can do one more? We don't have to.
Yeah, so fine with me.
I just have one comment. I just want to thank the woman with the camera there for not using New Jersey in your example and using the Long Island.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.